I think in that podcast, it was described as a game of Tetris. Right before you're born, for example, you meet God, and God asks you, what do you want to do in your lifetime? And you throw out all these things. I want to get married. I want to be with a lot of women. I want to have a successful job. I want to travel the world. I want to go to school. I want to get this degree, so on and so forth. You want to do all these things. And then God says, well, you can do all those things, but you have to do them in the right order. And that's a hard thing, is finding them in the right order to achieve and playing that game of Tetris.
So good. I really, really love that.
So you're on the Joe Rogan podcast, and something you learned from Rogan, you said, was that something valuable is often difficult to achieve, but just because it is difficult does not mean that it is valuable or worthwhile. What does this mean to you?
Yeah, so this is just a passing comment from Joe. And I'm a big fan of aphorisms, so pithy little statements that encapsulate a much bigger philosophy. And this I called Rogan's value difficulty conflation. So as you said, most things that are valuable are difficult to get, but just because something is difficult to get doesn't mean that it's valuable. And this is how non-valuable but difficult things get slipped into your desires. So, for instance, Joe said, look at the car he's driving, look at the watch he's wearing, look at the girl he's with. People would look at those things and think, wow, those are difficult to get, but they're not necessarily valuable. Just because something is hard for you to achieve doesn't mean that it's something that you should desire. There's many, many things that are difficult for people to get, and this was me speaking to me. Right? It was difficult for me to become one of the best known people in a city, to build this business, to do all of this stuff. All of those things were difficult. That didn't necessarily mean that they were valuable or worthwhile for me to spend my time on. Things that are truly valuable are the ones that are aligned with you. What do you want to want? They're the things that you want to want. And that's what you end up going for. Most hardworking people realize that on the other side of difficulty, on the other side of effort, is something that is worthwhile. There are very few things that are worthwhile getting that aren't difficult, because if they weren't difficult, they wouldn't be worthwhile, right? Mm-hmm. But just because something is difficult doesn't mean that you should put it upon a pedestal. You could say that becoming an arms dealer is very difficult. I'm sure it is. I'm sure the arms dealer industry is incredibly competitive and ruthless. But it doesn't mean that it's a worthwhile industry to try and get into. So you need to make sure, especially if you're the sort of person who realizes that you have a capacity for dealing with difficult things, suffering, working hard, grinding, you need to make sure that the reason that you're doing something is because you actually value it, not simply because it's something that's difficult.